Everything's working to about perfection to this point through 4 games, but now it's time for the SEC, and things get a little bit different when you step on the field with SEC talent. So we've got Ole Miss, we got Kentucky lined up for Saturday. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for our Ole Miss live show, and of course, person that makes it all go for us, Leanne Herring, the Rebel Walk. Leanne, what's going on today?
Like you said, we're already on, what is it, week 5. We've had a month of college football, but now the big boys are coming to town, SEC play, so we're going to see a lot of game changes. I think, like we talked about, I know you probably watched the film already. Georgia Southern put up quite a fight, but it just wasn't good enough with that explosive Lane Kiffin offense. And let's talk about the defense. That secondary, like we've been alluding to in the last couple of shows, really made waves. Like I said, in the D line all season has just been the unsung story. I said that early on, that I think, us going out there and getting that size and that power in the trenches is making a difference. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it be impactful as we head into SEC play. But again, the defense was just dominating and running that line, and Georgia Southern just didn't have an answer for it on offense. And I believe that, in this game, from the four, I hate to call them preseason, but let's say non-conference, because I go back to that NFL model, because I just feel like whatever Lane Kiffin is doing is similar to the NFL, and it's working. From all the teams that the Rebels have faced, I really do believe that it was about impeccable timing. Georgia Southern was probably the best team from all the early conference, non-conference games, and I think that was great. We saw a lot of adjustment. Again, I'm going to reiterate on the secondary and the defensive front just really being impactful. And I think that that's going to be a key factor in trying to control the game early, trying to give, as Kentucky heads into town this weekend, we're going to see how this crazy weather, I believe that that's going to play in factor. And some, it's, 90% rain, and then it's 10% rain. So there's a lot of interesting factors. But again, it was good to see the secondary and the linebacker play. I mean, I talked to Chris Paul's dad. Chris Paul just had himself a game. It was really great to see the linebackers just really be dominant in this thing. So like I said, I think we're seeing a lot more of what this Ole Miss team has in its back pocket. Again, I think there's going to be a lot more fireworks, not just on that offense, but on that defensive side of the ball.
Rain. I forgot about that. Just because I'm sitting down here in Florida, so obviously we're very well aware of what's going on, but it's pretty much on the other side of the state. Not that we're not going to get blasted and blown around a little bit, but as I was looking at that, I never really considered, because there's a lot of thought about Georgia, North Carolina going that direction, but just the periphery of this thing, since it's so massive, so huge, spraying water all over the place. So like you said, 10%, 90%, who knows what's going to happen with the weather and the way this thing's going to veer, and possibly slow down the track, slow down the game, maybe not be. Hey, on one hand, I want to say and think of Ole Miss as a passing team, Jackson Dart, all the amazing weapons, but at the same time, I think they're well equipped and want to run the ball and be a power running team as well. So this may be the game to show that side a little bit more.
No, I completely agree. Like you said, I think that there's no doubt that we know, Jackson Dart and the breaking records in the passing game. But I think, we'll see a lot more of the run game in this one, because I think, Ole Miss has proven in and out they can put points in the board. They can play those video game numbers. But at the end of the day, when you get deeper into SEC play, I feel like we see more out of the run, because it's the bet. It's stronger. In my sense, it's a stronger play, because you can control the clock. You can eat time. You control the game. You control the clock a lot more. I mean, you could go the distance. That Jackson Dart has enough targets in that backfield, that red zone, to throw a couple darts out there and get in the end zone. But again, those are not the plays that you always want to go with, because when you have the run game, you eat up clock, you're having successful drive, and you're wearing that defense out. So I feel that that's going to be a dominant force, because Kentucky's defensive front is quite good, and I think that we're going to see more pressure on that, and that's going to come in the form of the run game this week. So I completely agree with you, Mark. I feel like we're going to see more of the run game, just because it's going to make it a lot more difficult for one of Kentucky's assets, which is that front line, to be able to operate. Because like I said, we all know that Jackson Dart has all the targets and everything, and I do believe that on the offensive side of the ball, that we're going to see the tight ends play a lot bigger role as far as for Ole Miss on the offense in this one, just to be able to try to give a different look and create some chaos for that Kentucky front seven.
We'll take your comments and questions, everyone. Leave those in the chat. Keep in mind, you could be watching us just about anywhere, but we're going to move everybody to the Ole Miss channel. So please subscribe over there. So please do that for us. We had a nice little turnout last week with about 1,700 views. So we thank you for that in only our second week. But please make it on over to the Ole Miss channel, and we will drop that link at some point in the chat to make it easy on you. So you'll get our show each and every week, which let me get this straight. So don't blame Leanne for this. Blame me for the Thursday switch to Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, which is coming up because I couldn't make Wednesday work the first 3 weeks. But starting next week. Yes, we go to Wednesday, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We go to Wednesday next week, and we will blast that out a number of times to let everyone know. And again, we'll take your comments and questions. We hope to have Kevin McGuffey stopping by from Last Word on College Football. He's our go-to when it comes to Kentucky football. They're 2-2. They've lost 2 games in the SEC. We know what they did against Georgia. They played them extremely tough in the trenches, especially that was on home turf. So we can go a bunch of different ways, but I want to latch on to the last thing you were talking about that I led you into with the running game. So I looked at some of the post-game comments from the Georgia Southern game, and just, again, the offensive numbers are off the charts. Jackson Dart threw for 382, 4 touchdowns. Trey Harris had another monster game, 11 catches, 225, 607 yards of total offense to 194 for Georgia Southern. Ole Miss is outscoring its opponents at this point in the season, 240-22. So with the running game, and I heard from Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, they all, when brought up the numbers, the explosive plays, everything, said, hey, yeah, Trey Harris was elite today, so forth. But offensive line, take it back to the offensive line. Let's credit the offensive line, because these guys don't have the space. They don't have the room to operate the plays without the line doing its job.
Exactly. I'm really glad that you alluded. I always say that the big guys up front don't get enough credit. And I'll say it again. When we went out there, the offensive, the defensive line, we never had the size across the board. We always had sporadic size. But I really think that when Lane Kiffin went out there, and his coaches and his offensive line coaches, defensive line coaches went out there and got that size and power, it made a difference. And I reiterate that again, because the fact is, like you said it, and you've alluded to time and time again, we all know that Jackson Dart can throw it anywhere. He's got tons of receivers in the pass and on the ground. But like you said, it cannot happen unless you have a strong offensive line. And I think that's what we're seeing. We have a cohesive, strong set of group that's winning the games in the trenches and really winning those one-on-one battles, making sure that nobody's getting to Jackson Dart. That way, whether he chooses to go to the pass or whether he chooses to go to the run, that he can securely get that happen. Because I only think as we get deeper into SEC play that those defenses are not going to be as easy to get through. So like you said, you can't get it done without the offensive line. And Ole Miss has proved that that size and that power that's on that thing across the board is really paying off. And I really do believe that that's opened up a lot more security as far as Jackson Dart having that confidence. Not that he didn't have that before, but I think now there's that little bit of relief knowing that you have a stronger offensive line in front of you to protect you in order to say, hey, if I need to get something quick off, a quick release, or I have to think off the cuff a little bit differently, I'm okay because I have these guys making sure that I'm not going to get sacked. So I think that that's been a credit, like you said, to the offensive line, really getting out there and making sure that Jackson Dart is able to get where he needs to go, whether it's on the ground or whether it's and clearing the way, or like I said, making sure that he can get off to one of those crazy receivers. So like I said, it takes a lot of manpower, and they definitely have it up front, which is making a game changer. And I said it, early on in the offseason that the unsung heroes are going to be the guys on the line, because it's, winning those games in trenches, especially when you're going to be facing tougher and tough defenses in the SEC each game, is going to matter.
Hey, Jackson, thanks for being here. Thanks for dropping the links for us. So Jackson has dropped the Ole Miss link That's our channel right there at the Voice of College Football. So Leanne and I get together every week. It's going to be Wednesday starting next week. So 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And there's the link to subscribe to the Ole Miss channel right there. Appreciate that, Jackson. So connected to obviously the offensive line, to finish up the conversation about the running game. So I went through the stats, and Henry Parrish had another nice game, almost 100 yards rushing, I believe 89. He's had 57 carries this year. Matt Jones is at 30. Ulysses Bentley at 16. Dominic Thomas at 12. Do you think this is pretty reflective of where they're headed for the rest of the year when the games get tougher? Do you think that's pretty much running back distribution, or do you expect it to change at all?
There's been a lot of talk about, why certain running backs haven't been getting play time and everything and so forth. And I think that's biggest thing because of course we've seen Parrish, Bentley has. But I think that the consensus across the board and what we've heard some of the guys talk about, we're just ready to get out there. And I think that and when you have this kind of depth, and as you get deeper into play, you're going to have to use what works. You're going to have to use the players that works. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And so, I know that I think in the past, we've been so used to seeing, one running back when we had Quinshawn. It was all, that was just our go-to running back. But now we have such a diverse depth package that I think that we're going to be just seeing more diversity. Lane's going to put in whatever he thinks works. Whichever guy on the run game can get it done, and you can't take it personal. I think the guys see that too. I think one of the guys was alluding to, I'm just going to be ready. If I eat, everybody eats. And I think that that's such a great mentality because I know sometimes you get players that, they can't help but want to be the star and they want to be played. But I think that when you see this team, when you see the depth that it has, I just think that's what we're seeing as, we're going to do what works. And right now, this player's hot or this running back's hot, and we're going to stick with that. But I do believe that being able to have those options at different positions is going to be beneficial for, this team down the road because they can keep them fresh. Because remember, we haven't hit SEC play. So that's a lot different. Like I said, nothing discredit what these teams have brought to the table. They have brought out a lot of things that we know that we need to clean up, like the penalties. I mean, leave it to Georgia Southern to make us be the first, be the team that made us not, give up a TD on that crazy trick play, that they recovered and all that. But it just goes to show, that these teams, nothing discrediting them, but they're not SEC teams. So we have to remember that there's still a long haul here and we got to keep these fresh. So I think we're only going to see more of the distribution of the running back be different, but I don't expect it to go on the shoulders of one guy. And personally, I think that that's a better motion because if we put all our eggs in one basket, if something happens to one of these players, God forbid, you don't want your whole run game to be based on that. And I think that for so long, we were so used to seeing it be the one guy, be the star of the show. But I think now we have a lot of different stars at different levels on different packages. And I think that's where kind of we're headed. And I think that's not a bad thing. Like I said, especially when we're getting into SEC play, it's only going to get tougher down the road. And if Ole Miss keeps winning, if Ole Miss keeps doing this, it's only going to put a bigger target on their back. And it's only going to be every game is even going to get more difficult because it's going to be that one team that's going to want to ruin it for Ole Miss.
Before Kevin joins us, he should be here in just a couple minutes. We want to let some folks know where to find us. So that's our official account here at the Voice of College Football on X. So please join us there. That's easy to find. Jackson has left that link in the chat as well. So if you're on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, please join us at the Voice of College Football. We're so easy to find. You can just type in the Voice of College Football, or again, the easiest way is Jackson has made it super simple for everyone because the link's right there in the chat. So join us there. This right there is a book release that's coming out very soon. And I want to be able to send people the link on Amazon to go look that up. But I got to work out just a couple quick things before I do that. I think I'm just about ready to do that. We've thrown out October 29th as the launch date, but we think we can do much better than that. So it might be out in a few days. So if you love not just college football history, this is not just like a history book. What this is more of like bringing history to life and moving it forward. So we've diagnosed, analyzed, broken down all of the national championship seasons in the 1990s. And if the vote made sense, if they were valid, if they were credible, if somebody got left out, ripped off, broke down all the scenarios, all the rankings, all the results, everything. And then we move it forward to, okay, this is the way this season would have played out in the BCS era. This is how this season would have played out in a 14 playoff era. This is what would have happened in a 12-team playoff era. And this is how it would break down because there's talk about a 14-team playoff era. So we got you covered from the past to the future. So be looking out for that. It's called Disputed National Champions. We will have more on that. There's, of course, our promotion for the show. And sorry, Leanne, I mess up our thumbnail by posting my picture on there as well. But
Oh, no,
that's the way it
not at
goes.
all.
But we should have Kevin stopping by to talk some Kentucky with us. Do we have any injuries we need to look out for? Anything on that front?
Well, that's another question because now we know that the SEC has mandated. So yesterday, every Wednesday, now that they've mandated, coaches have to put out the list. The list. I looked over the list. It's probably every star player that if you're Kentucky, you're like, oh my gosh, Walter Nolan is probable or questionable. Listen, take those for a grain of salt because we all know Lane's experience in the NFL, putting out rosters, we have seen it time and time again. I'm not saying these kids are injured, but you want to leave a team like Kentucky questioning. So my thing is, I saw most of the Walter Nolan's questionable. Jared Ivey is set to return, but he's also probable. I mean, half the guys that if you're Kentucky, your eyes are lighting up because hey, they're probable, they're questioned. There's a chance, there's a hope. But I take it for what it is. So I mean, like I said, when I looked at it, I was kind of like, okay, this reminds me of being in the NFL. I mean, what was that season that Tom Brady was questionable and we all knew are probable? I treat it like it is. I mean, not saying these guys aren't injured, but I feel like on a Wednesday, a lot of these times you're not really gonna divulge who's 100% or not. If I'm a coach, I want to leave the team that I'm playing a little bit guessing. And I feel like a lot of these, some of the ones that have been out, some of the guys that are going to turn, I feel like it's going to be a play to play. Again, this is a problem we've never really had in the past where, we have our choice of guys that we can put out. Like if we need if Jared Ivey, he may be good to go, but let's say, hey, we're going to leave him a couple more weeks because we want to be sure because we don't want to lose our big players. If Walter Nolan needs a break, from that offensive line, so we can make sure that we have him for bigger games. Not saying that Kentucky's not a bigger game, but we go on the road to South Carolina next week. That's a game that's going to get interesting. That's a game that scares me a little bit. I'll be quite honest. I mean, you could talk about South Carolina all you want, but the way that they've played, and I'll say it, they don't have a lot of star players, but the way that, Beamer has coached and the athletes that they do have are just freakish. They just have these freakish abilities that can do stuff. I mean, we've seen it week in and week out. It's not just talk, they're translating. And then you got to go on the road to Baton Rouge at night. There's just a lot of things. So I think, those things, a lot of them, I take it for what it is. I mean, most of the guys are out or they're probable, they're questionable. So I just kind of looked over it. Not saying that's not important, but I feel like most of those are game time situations. But again, a problem that Ole Miss has never really had is like, hey, our top guys are out, but I know that there's a lot of guys that we have, transfer portal, veteran guys, young guys that can step up to the plate. So I'm not really worried if my first string guy has to sit out because I need him down the road. So I think that's a great problem to have. We haven't had that problem in a long time. So, I mean, there's nothing really that sticks out to me because like I said, most of our guys that are on there that you're kind of like, oh my gosh, but they're probable and questionable. But it's also a Wednesday. I feel like you treat it like the NFL. Like you don't want to tell everybody the real status of how injured or not injured they are. So I kind of just take it for a grain of salt.
We got Kevin here to jump into the conversation and break down Kentucky. Before we do that real quick, we highlighted our Voice of College Football. We also want to make sure that everyone knows where to find Leanne right there on Twitter. So that link is in the chat as well. So you can just join Leanne and recruiting the NFL. She's all over the place. I can't even begin to describe everything that's there. So for anybody that follows you, Leanne, what can they find on X?
Like I said, most of the stuff that you're going to find me most of the time is on the recruiting trail for Rebel Walk, director of recruiting there. So I spend a lot of my time between Texas and Georgia. As of late, when we were talking about the rain weather earlier, there's a kid I'll bring up that's not too far away from Ole Miss and just in their backyard. I was actually supposed to go see his game in New Albany, Mississippi, but they actually changed it to tonight because of this rain that might come in. So yeah, like I said, on the recruiting trail, most of the times on Fridays, you can see me. I'll be heading up back to Texas, up around Dallas during ironically, the Red River Rivalry Week. To catch Duncanville, DeSoto. There's a lot of recruits we're looking at there. There's a lot of, so that'll be one of the biggest matchups in Texas in 2 weeks that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, always catch me at the Rebel Walk. I also do a sports radio show every Saturday. We do a little bit of our college football betting. Big X Sports out of Louisville. I used to cover Kentucky and Louisville, and I still kind of do sometimes. So this weekend is always a really interesting and big, kind of tugs at my heartstrings because it's like I said, two home bases that have really, like I said, I got my career start at covering the University of Kentucky and now at Ole Miss. So two of my home teams, as you can call them, and I actually have a player that I helped recruit, Austin Ramsey, who will be on the opposite offensive line out there. That I'm really excited to see. Kind of the mama comes out in me is when you see a kid that you've watched, and helped from high school and now play in the SEC. Even though I wish that he would have been in Ole Miss colors, hey, I'll take Kentucky any second on that.
Very cool. So yeah, we bring Ole Miss and Kentucky together. Leanne, yeah, her story weaves through both of these states and these programs all over the place. We got Kevin McGuffey here from Last Word on College Football. We always appreciate Kevin stopping by. So I'll get the conversation started and then I'm going to back out of the way. It'll be so much better if you two talk Kentucky and Ole Miss. But Kevin, let me start on this one because we brought up this game a number of times because it was a heartbreaker the last time Kentucky was at Vaught Hemingway and right on the doorstep of pulling off. Well, I don't know that it was an upset at the time, but it was pretty much a pick 'em kind of game. Maybe Ole Miss was a slight favorite, but Will Levis, penalties, all sorts of bog downs in the red zone, and Kentucky didn't get it done, and some questionable calls, and just a gut-wrenching defeat. That's what comes to mind when I think Ole Miss and Kentucky is that game just from a couple years ago.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Mark and Leanne. Nice to meet you and be on with you guys this afternoon. And honestly, it's not just the last game; it's the last 3 times Kentucky and Ole Miss have met. Going back to my preview of the game just posted, or it's up on the Last Word on College Football site. The game 2 years ago. If there's a way to lose a game, Kentucky did it. Penalties, missed extra points, missed field goals. And then, as you mentioned, they had, even with all that, still had a chance to win. Will Levis hit Dane Key with the touchdown pass late in the game. And everybody in Lexington was like, oh my gosh, we're going to do this. And then penalty for illegal motion. And I think the very next play he fumbled. And that was that one. But then you go back 2 years ago when they played in Lexington. That game went into overtime, and Terry Wilson, quarterback at the time, came in, scored a 10-yard run in overtime, but Kentucky missed the extra point. And then Ole Miss scored, made the extra point, 142-41. Then you can go back to 2017, the time before that. Kentucky was leading late in the game, and I always mispronounce his name, is Jordan Ta'amu, I think, hit DK Metcalf in the end zone with 5 seconds to go. And shocker, Ole Miss wins again at the buzzer. So, history, you and I have talked a lot that there's a whole lot of history with Kentucky and losing games at the buzzer. And so, it's Stoops is 0-3, Mark Stoops 0-3 against Ole Miss, and it could very easily be 3-0, but it's not. And now they'll try to do. I'm not saying an impossible task because I am very impressed with this Ole Miss squad, and I have them, as most people do, as a playoff team. So, and then interesting stat we were talking about. It's almost 60 years ago to the day Kentucky knocked off #1 Ole Miss on the road back in 1964. So maybe this lightning will strike twice. Hopefully not lightning, because I know I'm not sure.
You don't want to delay.
No, we don't want that. I'm not real for sure. Is this part of that storm? Do they think it's going to come like towards Oxford for Saturday or?
Well, that's what we were talking about. I was going to watch a game in New Albany, which is about 30 minutes up the road, and they've moved tonight to their game to tonight because there's that 90% chance. But then you got others that are saying, oh, it's only going to be a 10% chance. It's going to be cloudy at kickoff. I mean, so it's going to be, but I mean, definitely that rain's going to play a factor. And it's going to be interesting because we all know when the rain's a factor, that totally changes the type of dynamic. And I mean, it being a homecoming, an early game, and like you said, Kentucky historically hasn't always been best in the road, but hey, you just never know on games like this, especially the way the Georgia and that defensive front that Kentucky is producing. You can't help but talk about that and give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like here in Kentucky, up here, a lot of the high schools have moved the games to tonight for that as well. But yeah, as you said, it's going to be interesting to see how Kentucky does. They played really, really good against Georgia. Held them, I think it was 260 yards, something like that, which is, can't remember the last time Georgia had that few yards in a game. You got, Deion Walker up front, Maxwell Hairston, all these guys. The TV station I work for, we have a nightly UK sports show, and we were just recording part of it a little while ago. And that was one of the big things that the coaching staff was talking about how you try to get ready to play against Ole Miss, and you can't because they play so fast. So, I think one of the coaches made a comment, said, it might be a 10-play drive, but, it's only going to take 2 minutes. So, he's got to, suck it up for 2 minutes, and then you can get a break. And then, they'll probably, you don't want to use the word platoon, but I would not be surprised to see and them alternating a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball. And it's going to be that's going to be a big thing, I think, to see how UK's defense goes against this high-powered, amazing offense that Jackson Dart heads down there. So it should be a fun game. We'll see what happens.
Anything, Kevin, that you're curious to know about the Ole Miss preparation for this game, or anything on the Rebels team?
I'm not. I did think it was interesting. I don't know if Coach Kiffin, he's always really good with the one-liners and the quotes. He did make the comment that said something along the lines that when Kentucky's motivated, they're actually a pretty good team, or something like that. And I don't know if that was, meant as a joke but I'm sure that's probably bulletin board material there on the UK coaching front. But I said, how will you guys, look at it as, like I said, Kentucky, you just, playing against Ole Miss, there's not any other school like them, the way they play, at least not that I've seen. Now, maybe, outside the SEC, I'm sure there's some teams that play really fast. So, I don't really know that there's a good way to prepare. But how do you, if you were Kentucky, how would you guys go at it? So,
Leanne, you get to self-scout here.
Well, you bring up a good point, going back to the offensive side, I've always said, even when I covered Kentucky, Stoops has built that program. He's been one of the coaches I heard early on. He's like, stick with us, believe with us. And you've seen him because, I was there with Joker Phillips. I worked under Larry Vaught when I was there, covering Kentucky. So I think everybody knows Larry, and you know the history of Kentucky football. It wasn't always the thing, and then now Stoops coming in there and really what he's built, you got to give him credit. It's not always operating the way it was, but Kentucky football has come a long way, and you see that, like you see presence and flashes of opportunity, like the way they played against Georgia. But what do you think that offensively, because we talked about the defensive front being a strong point for Kentucky, but how do you go against that Ole Miss defense when you know that Kentucky historically and what they've presented in the last couple games is they are not a fast, high-powered offense. So how do you put points on the board? We know that Kentucky can make the stops when it matters, but at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, what do you think Kentucky does offensively? Because they're not going to bring this high-powered offense like Ole Miss. But what do you do if you're Kentucky to try to control the ball, get the game early, and not let this Ole Miss defense stop you, and not let Jackson Dart get too ahead of the game before, within the first quarter or the second or the first half to stay in it?
So I got to say something real quick. I knew most of like your history. I did not realize, or I'd forgotten that you worked with Larry Vaught, because I've known Larry for years. I'm so old that he covered me playing in high school at Lincoln County here in Kentucky. Larry's a great guy. I think the world of him. But to answer your question, I think Kentucky just got to do what Kentucky does. There's the hope is that Chip Trainin will be back this week. Stoops said on his coach's show Monday night that he's been cleared to play. For those who may not know, he broke a bone in his hand near the end of training camp, at the end of fall camp. They were hoping he was going to be back by the Georgia game, but that obviously did not happen. And of course, you were talking about before I got on here, I was listening, and you're talking about the injury report, and the Wednesday night injury report, he's listed as doubtful. But in his absence, Demi Sumo-Karngbae and Jamarian Wilcox have done a really, really great job running the ball. I think you're going to see Kentucky do what they try to do. I think they're going to try to run the ball. Try to get 3-4 yards. You get 4 yards on 3 downs, it's a first down. Basically try to keep Ole Miss off the field. I think that's about the best way that you can beat them. Like I said, Demi, they've done a really good job running the ball. Especially last week. I mean, they were playing Ohio University and maybe a little overmatched, but still, I think that's that. If you're going to beat Ole Miss, you've got to control the ball. I look for Kentucky to run it. Obviously, they're still going to, the passing game. You can't just be one dimensional and run. Dane Key's coming off a career game. He had a really, really good game 2 years ago against Ole Miss. So, he's maybe a guy who can be a factor. And, Brock Vandegrift, I think, has gotten, progressively better. The South Carolina game, I think, was an outlier because, they just that front four for South Carolina was just on fire that day, and Kentucky had no answer. And it'll be the offensive line as well. Kentucky's had some injuries on the offensive line. They got to keep them out of the backfield. Run the ball, try to control the clock, keep Ole Miss off the field. I think that's how you beat them if there's a way of beating Ole Miss.
Yeah, no, you brought a good point, like I said, and we were talking about it before you came on about just, the idea of that South Carolina team, for so long, South Carolina is kind of like Missouri. They're not always taken seriously, but I mean, I was telling Mark that's a scary game, for the Rebels heading in because, South Carolina isn't as deep as a team like Ole Miss or some of the other, SEC powerhouses, but the guys that they do have, I say that they have this freakish ability, and the way Beamer has been play calling, it works. And, he gives people a run for their money. And,
Sure.
and another thing, you also mentioned too, is with the penalties, I think that's been one of the biggest things I know with Kentucky, but even Ole Miss, as good as Ole Miss has been playing, one of the, we saw early on is, a couple games ago, those penalties can make a difference. And how do you think penalties are going to play in this factor, especially, the turnovers and those kind of things? Do you think that we're going to see a lot of it? Or, it's a minimal thing, but I feel like Ole Miss too that's one of the things I feel, at least on the Ole Miss side, that Kentucky could capitalize, is find a way to get them to make some penalties, right? Because we've seen a lot of it from Ole Miss. As good as they played, as consistent and clean as they play, penalties haven't been our friend, in the first 4 weeks of the season.
Right. That's a good point. And it's been the same way with Kentucky too. And it's not just penalties. It's like poorly timed penalties. It's, you get a conversion on like a 3rd and 10 and it gets called back for a holding or an illegal motion or something. Yeah. But that's to your point. I think Ole Miss has had an issue with penalties. I don't know. Maybe do some blitzing, do some force. Try to get as much pressure on Dart. Maybe get some of those the offensive lineman get a holding penalty or motion, something like that, something to, keep pushing them back. And then it's the same with Kentucky. I'm sure Ole Miss is going to try to do the same thing because Kentucky has had issues this year with protecting the quarterback. And, and they've been a lot of penalties. But, yeah, like I said, I think maybe you try to do some kind of blitz. Brad White's group, bring some safeties, bring some corners, do some different things, try to throw like the line off their game and, force them, and like I said, I'm sure they're going to double Deion Walker on every play. I mean, everybody else has this year. So, maybe, one of the other guys, steps up after that. But I think you just got to put pressure on them, try to force some turnovers. Kentucky's good in the secondary. Like I said, I put Kentucky's defense honestly up about with anybody's in the SEC this year. Like I said, the South Carolina game was kind of I want to say like a one-off, but they had two. South Carolina had one interception return for a touchdown, and then had another interception that basically set up another. So Kentucky really only gave up like 17 points of the 31 that Carolina scored. Anyway, but we'll see. Like I said, you just got to get pressure and try to force turnovers, try to force penalties. Like I said, you do that and you try to keep Ole Miss off the field, keep that offense off the field, and I think that's your recipe for an upset. Now, whether or not that actually whether that happens or not, we'll find out about I guess 2 or 3 o'clock on your all's time on Saturday. Yeah. I don't know what the fascination is with the maybe the fascination is with these Saturday. I mean, I guess they're 11 a.m. games in Oxford. Like it seems because 2 years ago it was an early game that day too. So I don't know what the fascination is with that, but I guess you got to do what TV tells you.
Well,
I mean, nowadays, no, you go ahead and take that one. You're more versed on that one.
I was just going to say, Kevin, it's called being 0-2 in the SEC. That's what it's called. But I'm sorry to bring that up.
Oh, that's okay.
If they don't wipe out a 17-point spread, it's going to be 0-3 in the SEC. Mm-hmm. So we haven't talked, Kevin, since the Georgia game. Of course, we had you on to preview the game, but have not talked since the Georgia game. So the big takeaway across the nation on the Georgia side was what's wrong with Georgia? Are they as good as they're supposed to be, et cetera? The takeaway on the Kentucky side was, why didn't Mark Stoops go for it on 4th and 8, I believe it was, which I was clamoring for watching that game as well. I was saying, let's do the math here. I think you got to go for it here. So I'm sure that's been the talk since that game. And obviously you got to put it aside now, but you wonder if that will go into his thinking going forward. Number one. Number two, how much did he take? How much crap did he take for that? And what was his response?
Well, here's the thing. If you go back to the South Carolina game the week before, they had a 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 on Kentucky's own 30-yard line. Stoops went for it, did not get it, and then South Carolina punched it in right after that. So maybe that had something to do with it. But what I said, and what a lot of people have said, it wasn't necessarily the 4th down. It was the play calling on 2nd and 3rd down. When you had like, I think it was, 1st and 10, I think they got 2 yards on a run. Kentucky was having great success, if you go back and watch, running the ball between the tackles against Georgia. So my biggest thought was, why not keep doing that? And you get a couple yards here and a couple yards there. All of a sudden, instead of a 4th and 8, you've got a 4th and 3, which is much more manageable. But instead, they tried to pass. It was 2 incompletions. And I can kind of see, play devil's advocate for a moment. If it had been me, I would have gone for it. Of course, everybody will say that now. But the defense, you talk about how good the defense had played that day against Georgia. I think what he thought was, we'll take our chances with the defense and see what happens. And of course, it didn't work out. They stopped them on 1st and 2nd down, but over the last couple of years, if you followed Kentucky at all, they've had a lot of trouble on 3rd, especially 3rd and long. And that's what happened there. It was like 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and they went for 33 yards. And once that happened, there's your ball game. But to your original point, I think they should have done things differently on 2nd and 3rd down and then the fourth down, it may not have been, it may not have been 4th and 8, but yeah, I think at midfield, I still think you're playing the number 1 team in the country. I think you have to go for it, but I think maybe what happened the week before maybe had a little something to do with that.
Well, I didn't completely blast him because I didn't think it was like a completely boneheaded decision. Like, there's no way that you can punt there. No, you've stopped them all night. You've been the better. Now, they did just score a touchdown. They're starting to move it on offense. They're starting to wear down the Kentucky defense. But generally, the Kentucky defense was stellar all night. You can get the ball back. There was probably, 2:30, 2:45 on the clock, something like that. And so it was not an easy decision. So I didn't blast him. I was just thinking, okay, you're at midfield. You're about 15 yards away from a makeable field goal. You're that close to a field goal, and you may not get the ball back, and all those things put together. Versus if you give it up at midfield, even if they kick a field goal, you can still score a touchdown.
Right.
Maybe with a minute left or something like that. So anyway, I didn't think that it was a crazy bad decision, but that certainly was the talk after the game. Centered on Mark Stoops.
Oh yeah, he got basically any national media, and even some of the local media were all about that same thing. And to your point, Alex Rainer made a 55-yard field goal earlier in that game, so they were already, as you said, they maybe. And that one probably would have been good from 60, the one that he made. So you're only looking at like maybe another 10 yards and you were in field goal range. But like I said, I still think it was 2nd and 3rd down is what set up the failure on 4th down. That's my story anyway. I'm sticking to it. So.
We're talking about a lot of play calling, and we know Mark Stoops, similar, to Kirby Smart. He tends to make the smart move. He tends to play a lot. His play calling tends to be a lot more conservative than most coaches in the SEC. Is this the game that we're going to see Mark Stoops do you think that he's going to take that leap? And because, like you said, what he's going against one of the most explosive offenses, we know what the Ole Miss defense can do. Is Mark Stoops going to just let go of the reins and try something a little bit different? Do you think that he's going to make that step? Because I feel like when you watch Kentucky, year in and year out, they have a lot of assets. They have a lot of, power players that could be, game changers, but they don't always find that gel or that ability to close. You gave the great points of, historically, Kentucky's been right there. They've knocked at the door. It's like when you see Kentucky Derby, that dark horse coming down the stretch, but they just don't have the Do we think that we're going to see, because I believe that Lane Kiffin, and I've said it, I feel he's been playing it close to the vest. I don't think we've seen everything that Ole Miss is capable of. But is this the day that, is this the game that we might see, Coach Stoops move a little bit away from his comfort zone and, be forced to call some different plays that we wouldn't normally see him do just to be able to keep in the game?
I mean, that's something I would like to see. Bush Hamden, who's the new offensive coordinator, he did a lot of things, Boise State, lots of, motion, lots of, throwing in some gadget plays here and there. And as you said, Stoops is a little more close to the vest. But I think if you're ever going to do it, this is the week. Nothing would I think would be hilarious, and run some kind of like double reverse, long pass to like Key or Barry and Brown on the first play of the game. I've seen when Eddie Graham was the offensive coordinator here, they did that a couple of times in big games, just came out, tried something, off the wall that you would expect on that first game. And I think to beat a team like Ole Miss, you got to do something like that. So I would love to see it. One of the touchdowns they scored against Ohio was on a wide receiver reverse where Brown took they started on a toss sweep and then pitched it back to Brown, and he took it in for a touchdown. Something, even something like that, which is similar to what happened in the Gator Bowl last year when Brown had such a great game. But yeah, I would love to see something like that. People, Mark and I have talked for years. There's a part of this fan base that is just obsessed with like the air raid and that whole offense.
How about me? You can't help but be, yeah, of course.
Right,
it's like,
right,
make
right.
the air raid great again.
Because it literally, got started here. with
Yeah.
Mike Leach and Hal Mummy. And
Yeah.
there's a portion of this fan base that's what they want.
What they want.
Right. And I know that well for being,
Yeah.
with following and covering Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's, you see it on the message boards, why can't we be more like Ole Miss, or why can't we be more like, all these
Yeah.
other teams? So, but like I said, Stoops has a plan. It's worked pretty well, but I would love nothing more to see them open up the playbook. Cause like I said, I think in a game like this, you've got to take chances. You've got to do, you can't be, all 3 yards in a cloud of dust or mud.
Especially when you have someone like Barry and Brown. I mean, I watched that kid for a long time, and I mean, he's just super explosive, and he's just always on point. He's a game changer. I mean, you can't help but think that you want to utilize your strong players. Like, Kentucky's not full of depth, but some of the playmakers they have, I mean, there's that ability. Going back to Georgia and stuff. I mean, being able to keep that score a 1-point game, to keep it so close, you can't help but think, and I also say that a big thing was that it's just like, Vandergrift being a former Georgia player. If anybody knows how to go against Georgia is a team that you were on. So, there's a lot of explosive playmakers. So yeah, I hope, on the Cat side of things, I completely agree with you there. I would like to see, because I feel like having those exciting plays, I mean, you don't want to base your whole playbook on all that and all your game plan, but it's something about that momentum can help, switch a shift, especially with the players. I mean, you talk about the excitement. Some of the biggest plays that the players remember are just those crazy plays. You're like, where did that come from? But hey, like you said, you got to pull out all the stops. Why not? No better time than against Ole Miss right now.
Right. And Kentucky's got 4 really, really good, I think really, really good receivers. We've already talked about Brown. We talked about Dane Key, Jamori Macklin, transferred in from North Texas. He played at Missouri, for a year. He was actually, I think, when Hamden was Missouri staff, he was there. And then you also have Fred Ferrier, who transferred in from UAB. I mean, all 4 of those guys can be potential, playmakers, or game breakers. And would love to see, and the tight ends. The other thing about Kentucky is I know, everyone is every year, throw the ball to the tight end, throw the ball,
Yeah.
Back in the days of, CJ Conrad, when we would have, he'd have like 6 catches and 2 touchdowns in one game, and then it'd be 4 games before he caught another one. So,
exactly.
And they have done a better job, I think, so far this year of incorporating the tight ends. And Kentucky has a really good tight end room. So, but back to your all's original point, I would love to see just first play of the game, come out and just do something, double reverse,
out of sorts,
something quarterback, halfback pass. I don't know, something, but we'll see. And of course, if that happens and it's an interception or a turnover, then then it's like.
Then he might go back to playing it close to the vest.
Exactly.
See what works.
Yeah, and then we'll have Kentucky football for the rest of the game.
For the year, exactly. Exactly.
I
know that story well, but hey, Ole Miss fans have felt that too. I mean, for so long we were in the same thing. We were just winning party. So I definitely think that both fan bases have felt that hurt of of being in the SEC, but there's not much past a point. So yeah, this game, like I said, this game is going to be a great one to start off conference play, at least for the Rebels. I know.
Right. And that's I think that's something that Kentucky maybe can use as an advantage, is that they've already been through 2 SEC wars, and Ole Miss, it's their first game. They're 4-0, but let's face it, they haven't really, their schedule looked like Kentucky's probably from years past, when we would start 4-0, 5-0 every year, beating a couple of MAC schools and an in-state. Although we struggle with the in-state schools sometimes, Eastern Kentucky especially. But I think maybe the fact that Ole Miss hasn't played an SEC game could be to Kentucky's advantage. But again, we'll find out here in about 48 hours, or a little less than 48 hours. So
a little less than that. Yep, no joke.
But it's like I said, it should be fun. And then Kentucky has a bye week after this week, and then they start what I think may be the most important stretch of the season, because after this Ole Miss game, there's 4 games that I think they can win, and honestly, they're going to need to win. if they want to get to a 9th straight bowl game, because the South Carolina, a lot of people, myself included, thought the South Carolina game was going to be a win, but for whatever reason, Shane Beamer has has Kentucky's number right now, and it's so. It's that was very frustrating. But you figure they've got Vandy. Trying to think, it's Vandy, Florida, Auburn, and I can't remember the 4th game off the top of my head. But it's 4 games that they should maybe not be favorite. They could possibly
favored in, but
yeah. And then so that would get you to win at least 3 of those 4. That gets you to 5 wins, and then Murray State they have the week before. At the end of the season. So, I hate to be at that point because, Mark and I have talked that, Kentucky, we're past the point of just, hey, being excited about 6 games in a bowl, we want that 8, 9 wins, that we've had, the occasional 10 wins. But with this schedule and, the way things have worked out, we may have to, Kentucky gets the 6 wins and 7 wins. And I think I have them playing in the Liberty Bowl and our last word bowl projections. So, go to Memphis and be happy. So
no, exactly. And like you said, if any fan base has been patient, it's been Kentucky. Like I said, you've seen the evolution. We've all seen the evolution of anybody, and it's like you knocking on the door, and you want so much to be like, okay, we're grateful for it, but when are we going to get over the hump? Because like you said, it's so hard when you're so close to it, and that there's that ability there. And I think that's kind of what the fan base is just like. We're there, we can do it, and then it's just like we get to. I always say that Kentucky is like a Jekyll and Hyde, because like you said, some games were like, we look, wow, like where did this come from? Why weren't we playing? And then sometimes it's just like anything. So yeah,
right. And we've seen it with other teams. You've seen Missouri rise up, and where they are now. They won. What was it? I think when it all was said and done, was it Missouri? It was Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and I can't remember. There was one other school who didn't win either an SEC East or West title, but you've seen South Carolina do it, seen Missouri do it. And as you said, a lot of people are here like, okay, when is it gonna, it's got to be our time sometime, but it just so far it just it hasn't happened. But
you're staring at the school that hasn't won a
that's
division
right
championship.
For some reason I thought Ole Miss won. I thought Ole Miss won an SEC West, but I guess I was wrong on that one. I knew Kentucky and Vandy were the other 2, but so, like I said, we've seen it happen with other schools. So to your point, it's like, okay, when is it going to be our time? But you gotta use all the cliches. You got to, make the breaks yourself and take the bull by the horns and all that stuff.
All those things. Yep.
So Vegas says 17.5 right now. Man, they must be baiting me, because that seems like a big number. But at the same time, Ole Miss might enter the 4th quarter with only a touchdown lead, but that offense can rack up the points so fast it could be 21 before you blink. So who knows? Kevin, we appreciate you being here. Let everyone know what's going on there at Last Word.
Catch us Last Word it's right there on the screen, Last Word on collegefootball.com, or Last Word TV, or the cleverly titled at Kevin McGuffey. Because when I first joined Twitter, I tried like 10 different names, nicknames that I've had, and every one of them was taken. So I was like, well, if somebody has my name, then I guess I'm in trouble. But yeah, so you can check. Like I said, I've got a preview of the game up. We have, I think it's like 25 schools now, different schools that we cover. So if there's, if there's a team, if you have a favorite team, come on over and check it out. And like I said, I do bowl projections every week. And so that's kind of, we'll see what happens after this week. I think, depending on what happens in that Georgia-Alabama game, we could be in for a shakeup there at the top. So, but yeah, if anybody's interested, check us out. Leave some comments on the Twitter machine, and love to hear from everybody. So, but
awesome.
Thank you for having me on again, Leanne. It was awesome. Great getting to meet you. And
thanks for being on. I know. Small world.
The Kentucky connection. And then, like I said, talking about Larry Vaught, and I was like, wait a minute. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And looking for a good game on Saturday.
Good to see you, Kevin. Have a good one.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You too.
All right. There's the line. 17.5, noon Eastern on ABC. You're a betting girl. You throw those odds out there. You give it a shot. Do you have a lean on this one, or are
Yeah.
you going to leave this one alone?
You know, lately, as far as because the spread for Ole Miss has just been, outrageous number. I think the last 2 weeks have been closer, the lower numbers. I've been tending to go with the over and under in this one. I think I'm going to stick with the over under. I feel like I think we're going to go. I've been taking the under the last couple weeks, but I like the over in this one. I feel like Ole Miss is going to come out, but at the same time, I think you know. We talked about it right now. Are we going to see more of the run game because it's a smart move? What's going to come. So I feel like if we go to the run game, that we may not see as a high scoring game. But like you said, Ole Miss is capable of doing whatever. So even if they're down, even if they happen to be down at some point, it's going to take one or two plays, but they're going to be right back up. So that's what makes them so difficult, I think, coming into it. So I mean, that's still a hefty line. I feel like 17 points is a lot in this game because again, great point. Ole Miss has played 4 weeks of football, but they haven't played an SEC team. Kentucky, on the other hand, has already faced two SEC teams, have and kept it close, and got a run for it. So they're a little bit, they're coming out of the gate a little bit differently than we are,
Yep.
even though we're more of a well-oiled machine. Again, we haven't put ourselves to the test yet as far as SEC play. So I mean, Kentucky's going to try to pull out all the stops, especially with the defense. I mean, it's going to be an interesting game. And again, are we gonna see a lot more run from both sides? We both mentioned it about, is there gonna be more tight end play? I feel like Ole Miss is gonna try to incorporate our tight ends a lot more than we've seen them, just because they're gonna try to give a different look with that defensive front that's coming in for Kentucky, which, like I said, is the golden goose for Kentucky. But as great as the defense is heralded in this game, at the end of the day, you have to find, if you're Vandergrift, you got to find a way to put points on the board. And you got to do it quick because I feel like one of the keys to the game is for Kentucky, on the other hand, is they're going to have to control the ball. They're going to have to get off the jump early and simply control the ball, control the clock, and find ways in every drive to put points on the board. I mean, I mean, at the end of the day, you can have a great defense, but if you don't find ways to put points on the board, it's not going to matter when you're playing a team like Ole Miss because they're going to find ways to stop you. They're going to find ways to put pressure. And like I said, I foresee that our defense, especially at the linebacker position, the secondary, we really saw them come out. And I think that in this game that we're going to see them come out even more. So I expect a lot of the linebackers and Chris Paul to have another big game. And it's scary if you're Kentucky, if you're that Kentucky offense, because when you have to go against that line and then the playmakers they have, in that secondary haven't yet played their best ball. It's going to be a tough night for Kentucky if they don't find a way to keep it close or to get ahead in the game and put points on that board early.
All right, folks, we'll be back here next Wednesday. So not Thursday, next Wednesday. So blame me again. Week 4, we go with Wednesday, and we hope to stay with Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time with Leanne talking Ole Miss football. And we'd like to finish off these shows with a little recruiting and also a look around the SEC. So Bama, Georgia's obviously the Titanic matchup. These two teams have ruled the SEC for years, if not the top two programs in the nation, just flat out, period. So what do you expect in this one? Do you have a lean on this one? With Georgia
I think
Bama?
I think it's going to be a tough play to see. I think we're really going to see Alabama come out. I mean, we've seen a taste of Alabama and what they can do, but again, when Alabama and Georgia are going head to head, colliding, two historically SEC teams that have dominated. But I think that we're seeing different looks from Georgia, and obviously Alabama under the new not Nick Saban era, it's a lot different. So I'm interested to see how this game's going to play out. I think how this game goes, it's gonna kind of navigate where we go on the SEC. I think this Kentucky Ole Miss game, how that plays out. I think that this could very well be, is this going to be the number 3 spot trying to go in the SEC conference? So it's going to be really interesting. I think that this game is not going to be a high scoring game. I think that it's going to be really gritty. I think it's going to be down to the wire on this one. So let's see. What are we at the? What is the line on this one? I was trying to see.
Yeah, let me. The last I
Yeah,
saw, let me try to find it. I think Georgia's like a 1.5 point favorite.
You see exactly, and as good as Georgia is, Alabama. I was talking with someone, as much as you miss Nick Saban being there, you've seen a really lot of lightness from Alabama as far as the players and the mood, and I think it's kind of reflective of their play, So it's going to be really interesting. I really do think I can see why it's a 1 point line because I feel like it could go either way. I like Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and I think for this one, it's going to shape away a lot because, like I said, Ole Miss is going to be watching onto this game because the way this game rolls, it's going to see. I mean, because we're going to play Georgia at home, so it's just really interesting. But I like Alabama at home for this one. I just feel like in Tuscaloosa when you're playing, I think this is going to be a really close, low scoring game.
Got two struggling teams in terms of the offenses on the plains with Auburn and Oklahoma. Auburn has had all sorts of issues trying to throw the football. They benched Peyton Thorne for a game and a half and brought him back to try to rally them against Arkansas and put Hank Brown back on the bench. Jackson Arnold is having all sorts of issues at Oklahoma. They lost to Tennessee last week, where it was not Tennessee scoring a ton of points. It was the Tennessee defense laying it on OU and Texas A&M. Arkansas's been a pleasant surprise. They've played well. They go to Auburn. They win. They should have won the Oklahoma State game. They should be 4-0 right now. They blew a game in which they racked up almost 700 yards of total offense. Anything else there that gets your
Yeah, that's
interest
like I
going?
said that. Well, of course, Mississippi State going on the road, Texas. We know we're going to see more of a presence to Arch Manning. I mean, man, Florida really. Like I said, that was my. I talked about it on my Saturday show that Mississippi State Florida game was my dumpster fire pick of the week because it was just kind of like two teams in the SEC that needed a win. Florida went to town in Starkville, but man, Mississippi State going back on the road. I think this is this is tough to see. Jeff Lebby, at Mississippi State, is a tremendous offensive coordinator, just can't find his footing. And now you got to go to Texas, and the way Texas has been playing, with Arch Manning, getting some snaps in there and just, really as advertised. That's going to be a crazy game. Texas should dominate in that one. And like I said, Oklahoma and Auburn, two teams that I saw Payne Thorne in the offseason, was really excited. I felt like, when you talk to him and the way he reads the game, he reminded me of a kid who just was a kid in a coach's body because when you hear him, but Oklahoma and Auburn, I talked about Oklahoma a lot too because Jackson Arnold was a really heralded quarterback coming out of high school, a top player, and it's just he hasn't found his footing, and Oklahoma's played several teams and everything, and like you said, last week they benched him, so it's that that game on the plains is a tale of two quarterbacks that just haven't had a footing that when you think about it, we're really heralded coming in, Payne Thorne out of the transfer portal, and so that game should be interesting for me. I feel like Auburn's going to try to get out of the juice, but like you said, Auburn's got so many things going on. Of course, in Lane Kiffin fashion, coming back and rebuttaling with Hugh Freeze going, receiving a lot of criticism about how he outed his players and the criticism. And then here comes Lane in true Lane Kiffin fashion in his strategic way, countering that like nobody's business. So like you said, that's going to be a tough game, I think, as far as two teams that are offensively trying to get their head back in the game, because I feel like at Auburn, there's a lot of off the field issues. There when your quarterback is struggling and you don't have a clear sense of it, same thing in Oklahoma, it's really hard for your offense to get behind it. So, that's kind of where I see things. I think that's going to have to be a bounce back game. So it comes down to which offense is going to be able to lock in and kind of, shake off the funk.
So, folks, you get my predictions as a premium member on Patreon or on YouTube. So just go to the main channel, become a premium member on YouTube or on Patreon. Just look up patreon.com, Mark Rogers TV, and get my picks as well as Steve Merrill from Wager Talk and Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. So we've got all sorts of guys giving predictions over there. All right. Leanne, knowing you, you're always thinking Cruton. So what's on your mind this weekend?
It's another big weekend for visitors at Ole Miss. I know that there was kind of a couple headlines. We only have one official visit, and that's our Ole Miss commit Hayden Bradley, tight end out of Beaufort, 3-star kid. And but I have to remind people, just because we have one official visit on lock doesn't mean we're not going to have a slew of playmakers. And the list right now, there's a lot of 26s and 27s on unofficial visits that we want to keep our name on. 2027 four-star QB Malachi Ziegler, number 52 overall in the country. He's the kid that's going to be in town that I've been talking with. I wish I would have brought it up when we had when we had him on the thing. Another kid out of Lexington, Brock Kaufman, 3-star. He's, top 20 kid out of Kentucky, out of the Sayre School. He's a kid who's been heavily recruited by the Cats. Obviously, he's right there in their backyard in Lexington. He'll be at the game. Ole Miss is looking at him. And I think some of the big names, of course, 27, who's right in our backyard, is the number 1 OT in the class of 2027 out of Jackson Academy and in Jackson, Mississippi, that is going to be here this weekend, is Caden Moss. Like I said, really, really explosive on the line, young guy, but already making himself. Like I said, when you're coming in as the number 1 OT in the country and you're out of Mississippi, you're going to be certain that the Ole Miss Rebels are going to try to keep you at home. And rounding things out, of course, is another 2026 defensive lineman, also from Mississippi, not too far away out of Tupelo, is Jeraylin McCoy, a top 100 player, number 10 defensive tackle in the class of 2026. And there's also, a few other guys, Jace Matthew, one of our Ole Miss commits from Itawamba Agriculture in Fulton, Bryson Walters, a kid that has really showed out. He didn't commit to Ole Miss with a slew of offers. I believe it was like 4 or 6, but man, I've been watching his games the last couple weeks. Really, really is going to be a rising linebacker. And I think when by the time he steps foot on campus here very soon, that he's going to be another name that we're going to get to know, who will be on an unofficial. So again, a lot of exciting weekends, a lot of the young guys, the 2026s and 2027s, but some of the unofficials that I've mentioned here are a big move, and it just goes to show that the kids are coming to the SIP because they like the show, the entertainment. I know that we've talked about in the past weeks, Lane Kiffin urging, the student body to be more present, to stay for the game and all this. And last week we saw, with the record attendance, and I think it's only going to be more electrifying this week. But those things really do matter. And like I said, we only have one official visit on the books, but don't disregard that or misconstrue that, because there's going to be a lot of playmakers heading to Oxford, and a lot of top kids. I mean, we're talking, top 100 kids in their class, top 20 kids, number 1 at their position, wanting to come see what's going on in Oxford and want to knock on the door and want to punch that golden ticket to be a part of this Lane Kiffin, the greatest show on turf, as I like to call it. So yeah, another big recruiting weekend, a lot of unofficials. There's going to be we got a lot more names, but like I said, those are some of the early visitors that we've confirmed and I've spoke to. And and just talking with some of these guys ahead of time, they're just really excited to see what Ole Miss is doing. When I've talked to, I talked to Brock and I talked to Malachi, and they're just excited to see this atmosphere for themselves. And, they've said that what Ole Miss is doing has just been nothing short of explosive. So, and they haven't even made their visits yet. So it's really exciting to see the anticipation that, like I said, is not just only for recruits here, but I mean, Lane Kiffin is just really, really making a push on the high school scene and opening these pipelines for some of these top players, that they rather spend their weekend in Oxford. I mean, most of these kids are going to play, tomorrow night under the lights, and then they're going to get in a car or hop on a plane, to make it, because they want to see what's going on, what's so hot about Ole Miss. And like I said, they're proving themselves on paper just how good they can be. So yeah, another big recruiting weekend in the SIP.
Leanne is the director of recruiting at the Rebel Walk, and you can catch her on X and follow all her work as you see on the banner right there. Ole Miss Live comes your way next Wednesday. I said Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, subscribe at the Ole Miss channel. We have left the link in the chat. Leanne, appreciate you being here as always. And we will get together next week. Enjoy the football this weekend.
It's going to be exciting when Hottie Toddy. Let me just get on one thing because I felt like we didn't really hit on that, but we can just, just kind of what the keys to the game are. I just felt like we got to win the turnover battle. And I think the biggest thing for us is just we've been playing really good ball, but just clean up those penalties. I think keep it simple, but I think the Rebels are going to have a good game. But like what we both talked to, the little things make the difference. So again, another great weekend. Great weekend. Can't wait to be back next week to break down hopefully a win against those Kentucky Wildcats and, preview South Carolina. So hotty toddy.
There you go, everyone. You got your recipe for a W in Oxford this weekend, and we will see everybody back here next Wednesday.